What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Inside the Burrow. This is Jacob Kelly, joined by JJ Metz as always, and today we are joined by Stephen Whitaker of UTSA Rivals. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How are y'all?
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us on the program. Another week that we're really fortunate to be able to talk to a fellow host, a fellow someone who also runs a show covering one of our other programs. This is also your first year in the AAC, and you guys are 2-0 just like us. So through your first two games, what would you say your experience has been like in this conference?
It's uh it's been pretty good. I think the funny thing with UTSA is every conference we've ever started in had us starting on the road. So we played 1 year in the WAC and that started on the road. The first year in Conference USA was a road game at UTEP. So it's kind of interesting that they had us starting at Temple this year, and that was, I think, a good time to play Temple because UTSA was coming off the 1-3 non-conference, and so getting like it would have been a tough ask if you'd had to open at say Tulane. But Temple gives you a little more manageable opener, and then UAB needed no introduction. UTSA has kind of developed a rivalry with them in the last few years when both were in Conference USA, and that the two combined for four of the last five championships in Conference USA. So they had to go through each other to get to where they wanted to go. So that one was a good home opener. So I'd say through the first two games, probably went about as well as could be expected for who they were playing. And I think also what has helped is getting Frank Harris back. He missed the two of the non-conference games, Army and Tennessee. And then the emergence of the defense has now gotten five turnovers in the last two games, and special teams got a turnover against Tennessee, so that's six total for the team. So we're starting to kind of turn around, and now it's a manageable conference schedule. I mean, FAU is a tough opponent. Uh, Eastern Carolina doesn't look as good now as they did earlier in the year, but they'll still be tough. And then North Texas, that place has for whatever reason been a tough place for UTSA over the years. They've only won there once. So I think for UTSA, they're where they want to be at 2-0, and all of their goals of trying to win the new conference are still in front of them. But it's going to be a tough road ahead.
Yeah, and speaking of QB Frank Harris, he had a terrific year last year and he was a leading force in UTSA's Conference USA title. He seems to have regressed a little bit this year. What do you think are the causes of his regression?
Well, he had four surgeries between January and April, so he didn't really get to do a lot of off-season throwing or training, and it was even in May it was looking like he might not be back at all. So it's kind of a miracle that he did make it back after going through all those surgeries. And so I think it's more a case of he's like in normal years he would have gotten reps in the spring and the fall, and this year he wasn't able to get his spring reps in until fall camp. So what you're seeing is as the season progresses, he's improving because he's getting more reps and practice and in games, and so I think a regression is you could say that, but I think it's more just the fact that he was not able to throw for half of the year, and any quarterback is going to not put up the stats they usually do when they're having to deal with that kind of injuries. So I think as the season progresses, you'll start to see more of a classic Frank. And then he had a turf toe injury week two, which that kept him out of the Army and Tennessee games. So he is kind of dealing with that. So I don't know if he'll run as much as he used to, but his throwing is still there, and the receivers are stepping up when he needs them to. And that was another area that with JT Clark has been dealing with an injury from last year, so he hasn't really seen the field. And then Zachary Franklin transferring out. The receiver core was a question mark coming into the year, but Ogle Kellogg and Devin McEwen have kind of started to fill those roles for Harris.
When you look at the running back group, it's a two-headed monster there that gets the bulk majority of the work with Kavorian Barnes and Robert Henry, and they're two very different running backs with their very different body styles. So, what are the two roles that they play in the offense?
Well, and Traylor has even mentioned that he kind of wants to have an ability with three running backs because there's also Rocco Griffin can come in as a change of pace, and Kadrick Cobbs has been in running in the past and kind of dealt with injuries. So they're the two of them, Barnes and Henry. They Barnes is going to do more of like a power run, like try to break through the line, and Henry he's going to find the hole, and then he doesn't do a lot of moving around the line. Once he finds the hole, he's going to go. So then you put those two together, and then Rocco is kind of a similar to Barnes, and then Cobbs is kind of like a hybrid of both. So if you have all four of them going, you really can make it tough on defenses because you can have Kavorian come in there on short yardage. Then if you bring Henry on, which they haven't really done a lot of two running back sets this year, but that might be something they look into down the road because all four of the running backs can get you yards. Cobbs got quite a few yards last year before injuries. So it's kind of they want to have depth there, and so it helps them that all four kind of bring different things, and they can all four like if Barnes starts to kind of need a rest or something, you can run Rocco out there. So I think the way they want to run it is to get all four if they can, but at the very least to have three guys in a rotation to where defenses can't really focus on just one because another one will come out there that runs it completely different.
UTSA's defense has been a strength this year. What players have led the defense that FAU should be looking out for?
Well, I'll Trey Moore, the linebacker, he was half a sack away from tying the school record for sacks in a game last week against UAB. He's got 7.5 on the season, which is fourth in the country. And then the secondary has started now getting interceptions, which they weren't getting in the first part of the season. So you're going to have to look for Cam Alexander. Rashad Wisdom is always good at safety. The front of defensive line, there's quite a few players to keep an eye on there. They do rotation there, so it doesn't like some teams you might think you can wear down the defensive line, but with UTSA, they usually do two or three deep at each defensive line spot, so there's constant movement in and out. So guys rarely are out there long enough to get worn down. An exception to that, of course, is the Army game where Army had the ball for 45 minutes, and your defense, no matter who's out there, is going to get worn down if the other team has it for three-quarters of the game. But for the most part, they do a lot of rotation. And so for FAU, they're going to have to really pay attention to their film and prep work and kind of because each guy is going to do something different. Like Rashad Wisdom isn't afraid to, he got a sack this week on a blitz. And then he also had a pass broken up. So even the safeties also are not afraid to come down low if they have to and play in the box.
This is the fourth matchup we've seen of these two schools. It's gonna be the third time the game being down here in Boca. And FAU so far is 3-0 in that series. Last game was played in 2020, a 24-3 victory down in Boca for FAU. So what needs to change, and what does UTSA rather needs prioritize if they'd like to get their first win over FAU on Saturday?
So I think for UTSA, the big's going to be winning the turnover battle and putting pressure on FAU's quarterback. And then also historically, UTSA has not played well in the state of Florida for whatever reason. They're 1-4. So they're going to have to figure out, because the humidity there, it is different from here. And so you're not used to that. I mean, even in October, it may not be as humid there as it has been in previous months, but it's still, compared to San Antonio, it's going to be more humid. So they're going to have to handle that. And then the weather, South Florida, I don't need to tell you all that it can rain at the drop of a hat. And so they'll have to be cognizant of that. And we talked at his media availability this week. Taylor mentioned that the challenge they faced was that the last time they played Florida Atlantic, it was his first year, and so he was still trying to install what he wanted to do, and he said they weren't ready for that game, and so I think that'll be something different now. Is that UTSA knows what it is and what its identity is, and they'll have prepared better for Florida Atlantic. It is interesting that all the three previous games all came under three different head coaches for UTSA. The 14 game was against Larry Coker. The 2019 was Frank Wilson. So this will be the first time a UTSA coach has faced Florida Atlantic and has experience from playing them. So that'll be an interesting thing of, it's been 4 years, so a lot of the players for Florida Atlantic will be different. But there are players from both teams that, they would have been a freshman or a sophomore that year that are still on the team because of the extended uh, and extended eligibility rules. So that'll be interesting to see what the players who were there 3 years ago remember of that game and how they carry over uh, going into it.
The Roadrunners are coming off back-to-back wins. What do you think the key will be for them to push the win streak to 3?
Well, I think the recipe they've had the last two games is they've gotten turnovers on defense. That's two of the turn. They had two fumble recoveries against Temple that really kind of turned that game around. They had two fumble recoveries and an interception against UAB, and so and the first fumble for UAB allowed UTSA to go up 14-0. So that has kind of been a recipe of, if the Roadrunners can get out to a lead and then build on the lead, then they can kind of, trade score for score with the other team, which is kind of what happened in the UAB game there in the third quarter. So for UTSA to win, they'll have to win the turnover battle, and then they'll have to keep trusting the run game, which has worked the last 2 weeks. They're at, I believe it's around 400 yards in the last two games, and they were only about 200 in the two games before that. So the running game has started to get going. And then Harris will need to play a clean game and not have too many interceptions, and same with the offense not fumbling it. But if it does come down to special teams, the Roadrunners have been pretty good in that area as well. And Willie McCoy is a kick returner that Florida Atlantic will have to keep an eye on in the kicking game. But yeah, so I think for UTSA to win, it would be turnover battle, winning that, and getting the running game established.
So we talked about this actually a little bit before the recording started about some of our time as FAU fans watching our school. You talked a little bit about UTSA. So what would be, in your opinion, your favorite moments covering the team when you went to the school? If you could think back on your moments about the basketball team, the football team, what has been the most enjoyable part of that?
So I guess my favorite moment when I was a student would probably have to be the inaugural game when there was 56,000 people in the Alamo Dome, and it actually broke the previous record had been 44,000, and that had been South Florida in 1997. So UTSA broke their inaugural game record and then broke their inaugural season attendance record. And I think they had a better average because they had fewer home games their first year. And so that was the only thing that kept UTSA from breaking that one. But it's still that the Alamo Dome, that first game, there was the excitement of the unknown, and who knew what would happen in the next weeks, let alone what has happened in the ensuing years. Since then, the last 2 years have been fun to cover the team, especially 21 when they started out 11-0 and then won their first conference championship. And the way they got their first division title to make the conference championship game was on a last second touchdown pass from Frank Harris to Oscar Cardenas. And I have been the last couple of years I've used a decibel counter on my phone for like keeping track of big games because even the Alamo Dome, even with 30,000 people in there, it still gets plenty loud. And that UAB game 2 years ago, I think there were 40 or 38,000, and so I had the decibel counter going, and it was like a hundred. It peaked at like 112 when he caught that touchdown pass to win the division. And I thought it couldn't get any louder than that. And then 2 weeks later, when they won their first conference championship over Western Kentucky, it peaked at 113, and that's still the highest it's recorded on my decibel counter in the Alamo Dome is when the clock expired on and they won their first conference championship game. So those I think are the things I have enjoyed the most is that inaugural game and that record-breaking day, and then the last two runs to the conference championship.
Wow, I mean, that's spectacular. 56,000 people is
Mhm.
very, very cool. But going back to the game,
And it
UTSA,
still is the largest crowd in program history. They came 7,000 away earlier this year. They had 49,000 for Texas State, which is the big rivalry game down here. And so I think the next best chance for them to try for 50 would, probably be the next time Texas State comes to town.
and speaking of that, UTSA is favored by 3.5 points in this ball game. If you were a betting man, who would you bet on in this game?
I would be,
In
I
in
would,
terms of the
I would,
spread.
I would probably, I would take Florida Atlantic +3. I think UTSA would win it, but it would be a close game. And then if weather's a factor, that'll keep the score low. So I would probably say, you know, UTSA wins by 2, and if you had Florida Atlantic +3, you still cover.
Oh, well, I
But
definitely
I'm not a betting man, so don't take that to Vegas.
we've had a few conversations about that on this show. Just don't. It's not worth it. Just especially betting on your own team is such a dangerous thing because
Hmm.
your emotions get tied into both your money and what's going on in the field.
Yep.
Again, this advice also for JJ. I know you can't legally do it yet. Once of age, don't. Like I've gone down that road, and
Someday.
I've gone down that road, and it rarely turns the way that you want. Which is also advice
we
out there
do
for others.
Yeah, at Rivals we do a each week the staff picks the UTSA games, just what the score will be, and I've been right a few times like on the win, but the one time that I was like completely right on score and everything was 2 years ago when UTSA played at Memphis, and my prediction was that UTSA would fall behind early and then come back and beat Memphis 31-28 on a last second field goal. And so during that game, UTSA fell behind 21 to nothing in the first quarter, and immediately people started texting me like, "Okay, first part of your thing came true." And then UTSA started coming back, and they were like, "Is it gonna happen?" And then the UTSA's kicker, which at that time was Hunter Duplessis, steps up, and there's like 2 seconds left, and it's tied 28-28.
Oh my gosh.
And someone texted me, "Who do you think is more nervous, you or Duplessis?" And I said Duplessis because he has no idea that I picked this score. And later we found out that he had that my prediction had made its way around the team, and so that was kind of funny that he and I were equally nervous, him to make the kick and me to finally get one prediction spot on.
Yeah, I'm sure you didn't enjoy seeing that first part of the prediction come true, but it's always nice and a little bit of stick your chest out moment when you get something
Well,
as right
that's
as that.
like Scott Van Pelt says, that's why you sign up for 60.
That is, and that's why we love the sport, and hopefully that's why we
Mm-hmm.
love the game on Saturday. I think both teams. It looks like two teams that are coming off back-to-back wins, 2-0 in conference, both coming off impressive wins, both double-digit wins against their last opponents. So it should be a very fun test for this game on Saturday. Steven, we really appreciate your time coming on the show here today.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. And another thank you to Steven for coming over. You can go check out his stuff at Rivals UTSA for UTSA content coming up this week. But last week, JJ, you had a very special prediction how FAU is going to, quote unquote, your words, not mine, curb stomp USF. And they just went ahead and did that. Daniel Richardson really impressed, 382 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Something that we've been waiting for in the offense, another wide receiver to get involved. Tony Johnson led the way, 8 catches, 131 yards, and a touchdown. And then LeJonte Wester has continued his very impressive season. He is now officially as of the time of recording this, a top college football in receptions, had 10 catches, 123 yards, and a touchdown last week. Has 62 receptions on the season. So, JJ, you thought it was going to be a curb stomp. You thought the offense was going to go off, and they did. So how happy were you to see that, and how happy specifically were you in Daniel Richardson's performance?
I was over ecstatic watching the game. I mean, it just brought joy when all those USF fans were talking smack and saying
They were.
that they're better. But you guys are really our little bro, and you guys are going to be below us for the next year until we play you guys. And you just got curb stomped, embarrassed. I would not want to be a USF fan right now, man. And speaking of LeJonte Wester, I mean, I think he should be on the watch for the Bolitnikoff Award, which is the best receiver in the country. Looking at these stats in reception per game, as you mentioned, he's first in the nation. In receiving yards per game, he's 10th in the nation, first in the American Athletic Conference. In total receiving yards, he's 15th in the nation, first in the American Athletic Conference. In total yards per game, he's 5th in the nation, and per punt return touchdowns, he's 2nd in the nation. So those stats are very, very impressive, and I just think that he needs to be on that watch for the Bolitnikoff Award, and he's just really good, really, really good player.
Yeah, we knew this coming in from last season, but I don't think even the most diehard FAU fan would have expected this out of LeJonte this season. I was on a USF podcast after the show that we had last week, and they were asking me about LeJonte and just get him in space, and he's going to do a lot of work. And we saw that with the punt return for the touchdown. He just always seems to find a way to get open, and he has a really good rapport with Daniel Richardson. Daniel Richardson multiple times just two-step drop back, hit him, 5-10 yard completion. Just finds a way to get open. Really assured hands. Even he's a smaller body receiver, like only like 170, 180 pounds, so pretty hard to get your hands on with his speed. So he was very effective last week, and as I mentioned, Daniel Richardson was as well. 382 yards, 3 touchdowns, had one interception where kind of threw it to double coverage to Larry McCammon towards the end zone. It was on third down, I believe, so it was basically an arm play at that point. But 31-38, we've seen Daniel Richardson finally get accustomed to this offense, feel comfortable, which is something that we expected. We had a couple difficult games. We had the Illinois game, which was a difficult task going up to Illinois. Your first start as an Owl. Had the bye week, and then now just we're seeing him more comfortable. We saw that first initial win in the AAC, saw our second one last week against USF, and each week he has looked better. He's been doing a better job. Just feels more comfortable running the offense, and it's a good pivot that we've seen in this offense that we knew going into the season with Casey Thompson, they'd be more likely to try to move him around a little bit, and we actually got to see that with Michael Johnson coming in for the red zone attempts, where he had 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 carries, 17 yards. So still a little bit of that being incorporated, and very interested to see if that's something that FAU continues to go to, or if that was just kind of catch USF off guard coming into that game. Where you look at UTSA, we just heard with Steven, they had tremendous success in our previous Conference USA, and that success so far has continued over. Their 2 wins, their 2 wins in the AAC rather, have won 49-34, 41-20. So it's a team that can put up a lot of points. One of their losses against University of Tennessee with their starting quarterback out. So it was a loss that was expected. Both schools start 1-3. Both schools lost their starting quarterback. They only lost it for a time. They got theirs back. Both are feeling really good about themselves going into this ball game. Offense is humming on both sides. Larry McCammon had himself a good game, even though it was overshadowed by the performance by the wide receivers and the quarterback. So FAU feels really good about themselves. UTSA feels really good about themselves. But we want to know, JJ, what do we feel about this game on Saturday?
Yeah, and this is the American Athletic Conference game of the week, FAU versus UTSA. And FAU is about to road run the Roadrunners. It's not going to be even close. FAU is about to pummel them in the entirety of the second half. I'm going to go with FAU 52 and UTSA 21. High scoring game, but it's going to be really, really fun at home. And that week gave us confidence. Last week, it gave us confidence. Coach Herman said that the new expectation is to contend for an American Athletic Conference championship. And the winner of this game has a very good chance to getting that American Athletic Conference championship. If we look at what's on the line for both teams, they're both 2-0 in conference play, and the winner of this will remain undefeated in conference play. And there's a lot on the line for both these teams, but John Tay Wester is about to have a day over 100 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns at least. And I'm going to call this in there at least 3 rushing touchdowns from the 3-headed monster. And you could include Daniel in there. But it's going to be a really blowout of a game. Great atmosphere. Obviously, it will be homecoming. So we need every FAU alum to show out and show up. And we're about to win this game.
I was very impressed last week in every aspect. We already talked about the offense. I was really impressed by the defense. Byron Brown was coming off, the quarterback for USF, was coming off a week where he had over 420 all-purpose yards, rushing and throwing the ball, was the team's leading rusher, had over 350 passing yards. So I thought he was going to be a big struggle for this FAU defense. But the defense has, at some points, been the strength of the team, especially when we've seen the injuries on the offensive side and how they're coming to their own. And I've been very impressed by this defense's ability to keep a cap over the top, not really allow those big explosive plays. and hold opponents to a pretty low margin, only 14 points to, like I said, that very high scoring offense in USF. And then you translate that over to UTSA. Definitely not the same type of quarterback. Different type of quarterback when you have Frank Harris. 932 yards in the air. A lot of that, or how low that is, was due to his injury that he sustained earlier in the season. But he's not going to run the ball at all too much. Kind of like Daniel Richardson. If they ask him to, or if you find some space, he'll go out there. But only 75 rushing yards on the season. So a very different type of athlete that you have here with Frank Harris. I expected FAU to struggle against Brown last week. Was not the case. So with that being said, I expect Frank Harris to have some trouble. The defensive line has been putting a lot of pressure in the quarterback's faces so far in our 2 games in the AAC. I expect the UTSA offensive line to be better than what we've seen so far, but what we've seen so far is a lot of success getting penetration up the middle, and then the secondary, again, keeping that cap over the top, not allowing those big plays to break out. So whereas last week, in a very explosive, high-power offense that didn't work, I think UTSA, I think Frank Harris is going to be comfortable sitting back in the pocket behind his better offensive line. So I think they're going to be getting more scores on the board than we saw last week. I'm not going to go quite to 52 like JJ did for FAU. I will go with I'm going to go with a 35 to, I don't really think of these too much ahead of time. 35 to 28 score. FAU taking the victory. 3-0 in their first 3 AAC games, and starting with a 1-3 record, going to 4-3. Is that fair to say, JJ? Are you? I know I don't go the curb stomps like you do. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say so. It's 10 points differ than what the spread says, and the spread is not right this week. I mean, if I was a betting man, if I was able to bet, I'm taking this a million times, making 5 accounts, betting it on all 5.
Oh boy, that's dangerous.
But I just think that UTSA has really regressed from last year and the years before, and we've seen that. But their defense is their strength, as they only give up 23 points a ball game, and if your strength is giving up 23 points, no disrespect, I mean, there's better defenses out there. So I think that it's on FAU's home field. It's homecoming. UTSA is a very fierce team, I'd say, but I just don't see any game being within 14 points. I don't. But I wouldn't take it as disappointing if we win by 7 points. I just wouldn't be overly ecstatic, and my expectation is just to win this by 3 scores plus.
Well, you weren't incorrect in that assessment last Saturday as much as I tried to tell you were wrong. So I'm going to put my hands in the air, say I was wrong last week, you were right, JJ. And by all means, I hope you are correct with this assessment. Let us know your score predictions for the game on Saturday down below. Are you as ecstatic as JJ is, or are you going to bring it back, reel in a little bit like I like to do typically? Because this game could be between one of the 2 schools that all likelihood plays Tulane in the conference championship at the end of the year. So this is a very important game. Can really set the tone for both schools for the remainder of the season. So very excited for Saturday. We will be there live in the stadium just like we have done every single Saturday that FAU plays at home with a little game cast. Whenever the game goes to commercial, when there's a TV timeout, when there's a switch of quarters, when it's halftime, a little pregame segment, postgame segment, me and JJ will be live giving our analysis of what we have seen unfold before us. You can have the game on one tab. As soon as that hits commercial, hit that mute button. Go over to the YouTube channel, FAUOwlsNest.com. You can also find a link over there to tune in live while we are live at the stadium. So please make sure to tune into that. 2 weeks ago, I believe we had about 500 people throughout the total of the stream. So if you were there as part of those people in the stream, really appreciate you and hope to see you again. If you made it to this far, please hit that subscribe button down there. Hit that like button. Get involved in the comments. Let us know what you think about the video and your predictions for the game. Thank you all very much for watching. We will see you guys on Saturday. Go Owls, everybody.